There is a river in the American West that most people rarely think about, yet it quietly sustains the lives of tens of millions of people, waters some of the most productive farmland in the country, and makes possible the existence of great cities in the middle of the desert. It is the Colorado River, one of the most important and hardest working rivers on the continent, and it is shrinking. Over the past couple of decades, the amount of water flowing through the Colorado has declined markedly. Its great reservoirs have fallen to levels that would have seemed alarming a generation ago, and the vast system of farms and cities that depends on it has been forced to confront a future with less water than it was built to expect. This is not in any way a distant or abstract problem. It touches the food on the tables across the nation, the water in the taps of major cities, the power flowing from great dams, and the livelihoods of millions of people. This is the story of the Colorado River, of why it is shrinking, of who depends on it, and of what the decline of this single river means for the future of the American Southwest. It is a story of extraordinary importance, and one that everyone who eats food grown in America or cares about the future of the West should understand. Quick honest word before we dive in. A lot of people watch these all the way through, love them, and forget the one small thing that keeps a channel like ours going, hitting subscribe. If you are finding this important, take 1 second and subscribe right now. It genuinely matters for us and costs you nothing. And drop your state or country in the comments so we can see who is watching. Alright, let's begin. The river that built the Southwest. To understand the significance of the Colorado's decline, you first have to understand just how much this river does and how far its influence reaches. The Colorado River rises high in the Rocky Mountains, gathering its water largely from the snow that falls on the peaks of the upper basin states, and from there it flows for well over 1,000 miles, carving through some of the most spectacular landscapes on Earth, including the Grand Canyon, before making its way toward the border with Mexico and, in wetter times, the sea. Along its course, the river and its tributaries are captured, stored, and diverted by an enormous system of dams, reservoirs, and canals, an intricate network of engineering that spreads the river's water across an entire region. This water reaches an astonishing range of places and people. It flows to great cities of the desert, supplying a substantial part of the water for metropolitan areas that are home to millions, cities that could not exist at their current scale without it. It irrigates vast stretches of farmland, transforming desert into some of the most productive agricultural land in the country. It generates electricity at great dams whose hydroelectric power helps light the region. And it serves multiple states across the American West, as well as a portion delivered to Mexico under long-standing agreements. In all, the Colorado River supports the lives of tens of millions of people across the Southwest, a scale of dependence that makes it one of the most vital rivers in the world. It is, in a very real sense, the river that built the modern Southwest. The thread of water that made possible the growth of cities and farms in a land that would otherwise be too dry to support them. Without the Colorado, the map of the American West would look entirely different, its great desert cities smaller or non-existent, its productive farmland reverting to the arid scrubland it once was. Every glass of water poured, every field irrigated, and every light switched on across vast stretches of the region traces back, in part to this single hard-working river, which is why its steady decline is not a remote environmental concern, but a matter that reaches into the daily life of an entire population. The tens of millions who depend on it. It is worth dwelling on the sheer number of people whose lives are tied to this single river, because it is that dependence that makes its decline so consequential. Across the states it serves, the Colorado River provides water to a population numbering in the tens of millions, supplying homes, businesses, and communities throughout the region. Major cities draw a significant share of their water from the river, piping it across great distances through canals and aqueducts to reach the taps of their residents. For these cities, the Colorado is not a minor supplement, but a foundational source, one whose reliability underpins the daily life of their populations. Beyond the cities, the river sustains the agricultural heart of the Southwest, watering farms that grow an enormous quantity of the food consumed across the country, including much of the winter produce that fills grocery stores in the colder months. The farms that depend on the Colorado are a crucial part of the national food supply, and their productivity rests on the reliable delivery of the river's water. When we consider that the river supports both the urban populations of great desert cities and the agricultural output that feeds much of the nation, the scale of what is at stake in its decline comes into focus. This is not a river whose troubles affect only a small or distant group of people. It is a river woven into the fabric of American life, its water present in the food we eat and the cities where millions live, and its shrinking is therefore a matter of national significance. Why the river is shrinking, having grasped how much depends on the Colorado, we come to the central and urgent question: why is it shrinking? The answer involves several forces working together, each compounding the others. The most fundamental is a prolonged period of drought that has gripped the region for the better part of 2 decades, one of the most severe and sustained dry spells the Southwest has experienced in a very long time. Year after year of below-average precipitation and diminished snowpack in the mountains that feed the river has meant less water flowing into the system, steadily draining the reserves that had been built up in wetter times. Compounding the drought is the broader warming of the climate, which affects the river in ways that go beyond simply reducing rainfall. Higher temperatures increase the evaporation of water from the reservoirs, the soil, and the vegetation, and they change the behavior of the mountain snowpack, causing more of it to evaporate or to melt in ways that deliver less water to the river. The warming also means that even in years with decent snowfall, less of that snow ultimately reaches the river as flow, because more of it is lost to the warmer, thirstier environment. This warming-driven decline is a persistent underlying force that reduces the river's flow independent of the ups and downs of any given year's precipitation, and it is a central reason that scientists expect the challenges to continue. On top of these natural and climatic forces sits a human one, for a very long time. More water has been promised and used from the Colorado than the river reliably provides, a chronic overallocation that means the system was living beyond its means even before the drought deepened the crisis. Together, these forces, the drought, the warming, and the overallocation, have driven the river into a decline that has proven both severe and lasting. Some scientists describe the current era not merely as a drought, which implies a temporary dry spell that will eventually end, but as a longer-term shift toward a drier climate, a fundamental reduction in the water the river can be expected to carry, which would make the challenge a permanent feature of the region's future rather than a passing hardship to be waited out. Here is something I would genuinely love to know, and it takes 10 seconds. Did you have any idea that this one river feeds so much of the country's food and so many major cities? Drop a yes or no in the comments, because your answers help us understand what surprises people most, and I read every reply. Okay, back to it. The great reservoirs in decline. Nowhere is the shrinking of the Colorado more visible than in its 2 great reservoirs, the enormous artificial lakes that store the river's water and buffer the region against dry years. These reservoirs, the largest in the country, were built to hold several years' worth of the river's flow, a vast reserve designed to keep water and power flowing even through periods of drought. For much of their history, they were kept relatively full, a comfortable cushion against uncertainty. But the sustained decline of the river has drawn them down dramatically, and in recent years, they have fallen to levels far below their capacity, exposing long submerged canyon walls and leaving stark rings of pale rock to mark where the water used to be. The falling reservoirs are more than a striking visual. They represent a genuine threat to the functions the river system provides. As the water level in a reservoir drops, it approaches thresholds that carry serious consequences. There is a level below which the dams can no longer generate hydroelectric power, cutting off a source of electricity for the region. And there is a lower level still, sometimes called dead pool, at which water can no longer pass through the dam at all, which would be catastrophic for everyone downstream who depends on the water being released. The decline of the reservoirs toward these thresholds has been the clearest and most alarming signal of the crisis, a countdown measured in the falling surface of the water, and it has driven much of the urgency in the effort to address the river's decline. The great reservoirs, once symbols of the region's mastery over the river, have become instead the most visible measure of how much that mastery is being tested. The farms and the food supply, one of the most important and least appreciated dimensions of the Colorado's decline, is its effect on agriculture. because the largest share of the river's water goes not to cities, but to farms, and those farms feed a great many people far beyond the region. The agricultural areas that depend on the Colorado produce an enormous quantity of food, including a large portion of the vegetables and other crops that Americans eat, particularly during the winter months when much of the rest of the country cannot grow fresh produce. This makes the river a linchpin of the national food supply, and its decline a matter that reaches into kitchens across the country. As the river shrinks and the water available for irrigation is reduced, farmers face difficult choices, cutting back on the amount of land they plant, switching to less thirsty crops, investing in more efficient irrigation, or in some cases leaving fields fallow altogether. These adjustments have real consequences for the farmers whose livelihoods depend on the water, for the workers and communities that the agricultural economy supports, and potentially for the price and availability of food for consumers. Because agriculture uses the majority of the river's water, it is also at the center of the effort to reduce overall demand. And the question of how to balance the needs of farms against those of cities, and how to share the reductions fairly, is one of the most contentious and consequential aspects of managing the shrinking river. The story of the Colorado is, to a very large degree, a story about food and the water that grows it, and the decline of the river puts a quiet but real pressure on the systems that feed the nation. Quick pause, because this matters and deserves to be seen. If you are getting value from this, tap the like button. It really does help the video reach more people. And if you have family or friends in the Southwest, or anyone who cares about where their food and water come from, share this with them, because it is genuinely important to understand. One like, one share to someone you care about, and let's keep going. The law of the river and the struggle to share. The management of the Colorado River is governed by a complex framework of laws, compacts, and agreements built up over the past century, a body of rules often called the law of the river. And this framework is at the heart of both the problem and the search for solutions. The foundational agreements divided the river's water among the states of the upper and lower basins and set out the obligations for how much water must be delivered downstream, and they were written in an era when the river was assumed to carry more water than it actually does over the long term. This original overestimation of the river's flow is a root cause of the chronic overallocation, because the promises made were based on numbers the river cannot reliably meet. As the river has shrunk, the states, the federal government, and the many other parties with a stake in the water have been engaged in difficult and often tense negotiations over how to share the shortfall, how much each user must cut back, and how to keep the great reservoirs from falling to catastrophic levels. These negotiations are enormously complicated because they pit states against one another, cities against farms, and present needs against future obligations, and because the legal framework gives different users different rights and priorities. Reaching agreement has been challenging, and the process has been marked by hard bargaining, temporary deals, and the constant pressure of the falling reservoirs forcing action. Yet there have also been real achievements, agreements to reduce usage and to keep the system functioning, born of the recognition that the alternative, a disorderly collapse of the system, would be far worse for everyone. The struggle to share the shrinking river is a profound test of cooperation, a challenge of governance as much as of engineering, and its outcome will shape the future of the entire region. The power that flows from the dams beyond water for cities and farms, the Colorado River provides something else that the region depends on, and its decline threatens this too: electricity. The great dams that hold back the river's water are also hydroelectric power plants, using the force of the water passing through them to spin turbines and generate electricity that flows into the grid, serving millions of people. This hydroelectric power is a valuable resource, clean and reliable, and it has long been part of the foundation on which the region's energy supply rests. The dams were built to be not only reservoirs, but power stations, and for generations they have quietly produced electricity as the water flowed through them. The shrinking of the river endangers this power generation, because as the reservoirs fall, the capacity of the dams to generate electricity diminishes, and if the water were to drop below the level of the intakes that feed the turbines, generation would stop altogether. The prospect of losing this hydroelectric power has been one of the serious concerns driving the urgency of the response to the river's decline, because it would remove a source of clean electricity from a region that depends on it and would need to make up the difference from other sources. The threat to the dam's power is another dimension of how deeply the river is woven into the life of the Southwest, providing not only the water that sustains cities and farms, but the electricity that helps power them, and its decline puts all of these vital functions at risk at once. It is a reminder that a great river like the Colorado is not a single resource, but many, and that its shrinking touches everything it once so reliably provided. What can be done faced with a shrinking river and a growing population? The region is not helpless, and there is a great deal being done, and that can be done, to adapt to the new reality of less water. Conservation has emerged as one of the most powerful tools, and the results have been striking, with some cities managing to reduce their water use dramatically even as their populations grow, through measures like replacing thirsty lawns with desert landscaping, fixing leaks, recycling and reusing water, and encouraging efficiency in every corner of daily life. These efforts show that a great deal of water can be saved without sacrificing the quality of life, and they are a central part of the response to the river's decline. In agriculture, which uses the most water, there is significant potential to improve efficiency through better irrigation techniques, the lining of canals to prevent leakage, and the shifting of crops and practices to use water more sparingly, though these changes can be costly and difficult for farmers to make. Beyond conservation and efficiency, the region is exploring additional sources of water, such as the increased reuse and recycling of wastewater, and, in some coastal areas, the removal of salt from seawater to create new supply, though such approaches have their own costs and limits. And underlying all of these efforts is the difficult work of adjusting the expectations and the legal commitments built around the river to match the reality of how much water it actually provides, bringing demand into line with supply. None of these solutions is easy or complete on its own, but together they offer a path toward living within the means of a diminished river. And the region has shown real capacity for adaptation and ingenuity in rising to the challenge. All right, I know, second time I am bringing this up, feel free to sigh at me, but quickly, if you have made it this deep into a video about the Colorado River, you clearly care about this stuff, and a lot of you who watch have not subscribed yet. That one tap genuinely tips the scales for a small channel like ours. No guilt, just a grateful ask. That is the last time. Promise. Let's finish. The bigger picture and the road ahead, when we step back and consider the shrinking of the Colorado River in its fullest context, we see a story that is about far more than one river, because it is a preview of the kind of challenge that a warming, drying world is bringing to many regions. The Colorado is among the first and most dramatic examples of a vital water source being pushed beyond its limits by the combination of drought, warming, and human demand, and how the region responds will offer lessons for the many other places that will face similar pressures in the years ahead. The river's crisis is a test not only of engineering and law, but of the ability of people and governments to cooperate, to plan for a changed future, and to make the difficult adjustments that a new reality requires. The road ahead for the Colorado will not be easy, and the river is unlikely to return anytime soon to the abundant flows of the past. The forces driving its decline, especially the warming climate, are expected to continue, which means the region must learn to thrive with less water rather than waiting for the old abundance to return. But the situation is far from hopeless, because the tools of conservation, efficiency, cooperation, and adaptation are real and powerful. And the region has already shown remarkable capacity to reduce its demand and to negotiate shared solutions in the face of the crisis. The future of the Colorado will depend on whether that capacity can be sustained and expanded, on whether the states and users can continue to cooperate rather than descend into conflict, and on whether the hard choices required can be made in time. The shrinking of the Colorado River is a serious and genuine challenge, one that touches the lives of tens of millions and the food supply of a nation, but it is also a challenge that human ingenuity and cooperation can meet if they are brought fully to bear. The river that built the Southwest is being tested as never before, and the response to that test will shape the region for generations to come. A defining story of how a modern society learns, at last,